Welcome to the Orange Couch.
I'm Mark.
I'm Amanda.
And this is Mad Men, Season 7, Episode 8, Severance.
Jenny and I were feeding the elephant when she said,
Mommy, the elephant has wrinkly pantyhose just like yours.
It was terribly embarrassing, but the little rascal was right. Now, I wear legs.
Legs pantyhose were revolutionary in a lot of ways. Compact, affordable, wore well with the on-trend miniskirts. But above all, they were cheap and disposable. Peggy and Joan highlight Topaz as reusable. But the whole point of the legs pantyhose was that they were so cheap that if you tore them, it didn't matter. You could just dash to the drugstore and get some more for nothing.
This is not unlike how Don views women now. He browses his options.
At 7:30, Laura called. 9:30, Maxine called. At 10, Trisha from TWA.
And what are you doing tonight, Joanne?
Then he yanks one off the rack, wears it, and discards it. Like it always has for Don, this only provides a fleeting moment of happiness, as fragile as supermarket pantyhose. But it's cheap and easy for him to find a disposable woman anytime he wants.
In case there was any doubt, the clear theme of tonight's episode was disposability versus quality. What's funny is these characters have largely become wealthy with their work in advertising and are quite literally free to have any life they want. They could pursue meaningful experiences, try creative endeavors, or even just really devote themselves to life and family. But instead, they just keep returning to the cheap, disposable life of working in an ad agency and giving their creative energies over to garbage. No wonder the waitress had John Dos Passos' USA trilogy in her pocket. That entire book is basically pushing the message that the empty pursuit of wealth shrivels men's souls.
Don's life is emptiness writ large. His dreams even tell him so.
I'm supposed to tell you you missed your flight.
He walks into his apartment, turns on the lights, and is so uncomfortable with the emptiness staring back at him that he flips them right back off. In the past, he confided to Peggy that his great fear is being unloved, and that seems to be what his focus on his career over his marriage, again, has brought him. And then he gets a look at Rachel's life, which her sister sums up.
She lived the life she wanted to live. She had everything.
Rachel leaves behind a loving family and a community into which she was deeply woven. She also led a business, but it was one that was part of her family instead of a convenient excuse to avoid it. She was rich in all the ways Don isn't.
Building a life like that requires care. For people who want the expensive, high-quality stockings instead of the disposable legs ones, that means being careful about putting them on and washing them so you don't rip them. But Don is a man incapable of caring about quality things. Take that white rug that Megan bought for the apartment. Megan was that white rug. Beautiful, trendy, but needed some basic care. And Don just spills wine all over it.
Not only can Don not care for the quality things in his life, he's so lost that he can't even tell the real from the disposable anymore. The waitress with a passing resemblance to Rachel becomes his obsession, and he manages to dehumanize both of them in his futile attempt to make something real out of it. In the end, he's aching to sit near someone who barely looks like a woman he loved 10 years ago. That's his life.
This episode ended all doubt that Peggy is someone who, even though her date calls her fearless, is letting fear control her life. The disposable world of advertising, where she works her ass off to come up with some brilliant idea that will just be churned out and forgotten in a year's time, is all she knows, and she's afraid to think any bigger. It's not a coincidence that Peggy has repeatedly been shown in this series to be overlooked for awards. The fates are conspiring to cheat her out of any kind of legacy, even just a Clio. She's on the hamster wheel, and she doesn't know how to get off of it.
The opportunity to live a little blossoms via the drunken plan to fly off to Paris with a new man. But the first obstacle Peggy hits, struggling to find her passport after a few minutes, becomes the easy way to escape the adventure. Soon, it's Paris in 2 weeks. By the next morning, she's retreated all the way back into her plastic cup entirely.
I'm not going to get on a plane with somebody I barely know.
Peggy is so afraid of risks that she almost ruins her date by haranguing him about not sending back his meal because the kitchen got the order wrong.
I don't know why you're eating something you didn't order.
She saves this date by choosing to eat something she didn't order. After all, she loves veal. And it was fun. It's fun to just try something new, go with the flow, let go a little. But because this is Mad Men, the lesson doesn't even last the hangover.
Ken gets 2 wake-up calls in 24 hours about the lack of quality in his life. First, his wife gets furious that he refuses to walk away from the eye-stealing ad world to live the life of writing an adventure he'd love. And then the next morning he's shit-canned because of a petty 6-year-old grudge from his McCann days. Briefly, Ken gets it.
That's not a coincidence. That's a sign.
Of what?
The life not lived.
But in the end, he takes another ad job, choosing safety and the fleeting thrill of revenge over substantive change and a chance at lasting happiness.
Is there anything cheaper than revenge? One thing I thought was interesting that Ken evolved over the course of the series from the guy who wanted to write literary type things to finding his spirit in writing science fiction. So it's clear to me that this isn't Weiner being a snob and suggesting everyone who isn't a great artist is wasting their lives. The question is whether you are working towards something real or not. 60s era sci-fi may not have been Ernest Hemingway, but it was still about trying to say something other than buy my cheap shit.
Speaking of bad knockoffs, did you get a load of Teddy? He's ooh-la-laing over models at casting calls, not wearing a wedding ring, throwing swinging parties at his pad, and getting excited over rising hemlines. In case that doesn't remind you of anyone, take a look at the matching mustaches. Teddy's morphing into a poor copy of Roger, and I doubt it's doing much for his soul.
This is supposedly a mid-season episode, but it really felt like a premiere for the final season. And it leaves the audience with no doubt about the show and what it's trying to say. From the beginning, Mad Men has never been about glamorizing the ad culture of the 60s, but about singling this out as the era when American capitalism began to really spiral out of control, replacing any sense of depth or meaningfulness in American life with a bunch of cheap, disposable goods.
As Mad Men winds down, so too will the Orange Couch. But we're happy to announce a new adventure. We hope you'll join us over at slate.com for House Slate, a next-day video series breaking down each episode of Game of Thrones.
But we're going to do what Don can't seem to do with his marriages and see this through. See you next week on the Orange Couch.